Okay, we're live. Hey folks, this is RunnerStorm331 back to doing another guide for Final Fight for speedrunning. Today we're going to be covering the pre-ultimate stage of Final Fight, being the Bay Area. It is arguably one of the two longest stages in the entire game, the other one being Uptown. And this game in the arcade version adds tons of enemies to fight here. So you're going to be seeing loads and loads of enemies here. So anyway, as a quick reminder, this guide is meant to help not only those play normally, but also those that utilize Turbo Fire like myself. So basically, if you're don't want to do a Turbo Fire, just play it like normal, and you should be good to go. But if you do have to be careful when using Auto Fire, because it's pretty easy not to switch direction or activate your other moves when doing your punches. So be very careful when you use Auto Fire if you're doing those kind of runs for speedruns.com. So anyway, once we get done here, I'll highlight this and export it to YouTube, and then set up the guide on speedruns.com eventually. So if it doesn't happen today, it'll probably happen tomorrow. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. So the Bay Area is pretty much one of the longest areas in the entire game. You got tons of enemies that are going to be coming out to attack you, and they will try to stop you from advancing. So as you can see here, we don't have as much enemies to deal with, and thankfully we didn't have to deal with them. But once we get to this first stop, we're going to be encountering a large amount of enemies coming out to fight. And one thing to keep in mind when doing runs for this area is that you're going to probably dealing with groups that are fought in one specific group of enemies. Like right here, you're dealing with basically the Headbutt Brigade, but before that, you were dealing with mostly the minor enemies. So I'm going to go ahead and redo this again to give you a general idea. So most of this first area, you're going to be dealing with 2Ps, Simmons, Brad, and a Slash. But yeah, if you're playing this normally, you would have to advance pretty quickly because these enemies will get up close and attack you. So in a speedrun setting, you do not want to be dealing with these enemies. You just want to be back leaping as much as possible. But for the most part, the enemies will do their best to try to keep you from advancing. Even though the game tells you to go, the enemies don't want you going. They want to make sure you stop your advance one way or the other. So anyway, coming up to this area, when you get to this part where the phone booths are, you're going to be dealing with mostly Brad, Doug's, and Jake's. So you can say they're plentiful throughout this entire area, but this is actually the one area where you'll fight more of them than anywhere else. So I'm going to go ahead and create a restore point right here to go over the first stop area. Now, if you remember the old tricks for Final Fight console version, this also applies to the dog here, because you could get some pretty weird bonuses if you're standing near it through a certain amount of time passes. Like you can get more score, get more health, or something like that. But technically, it's not really needed for a speedrun. But technically, right here we have our first encounter with the Headbutt Brigade, where you have to fight the entire pack. So don't be afraid to whip out those extra joys if you don't want to get hit by their charges. So you deal with the first four right here. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that once we beat these guys, the other four will come out in the four corners. So as you see right there, each one appeared on each of the four different corners of the screen. So the first one will emerge at the top right, the other will emerge on the bottom right, then the bottom left, then the top left. So if you're low on health from fighting all those enemies, you can always break these to recover your health, and that'll eventually get you restored. So if you're running low on health, make sure to do just that. So coming up, we can actually despawn this Endori that would normally appear. Now, if you were to break this drum barrel and then move forward, you would have to deal with Endori Jr. and his brother Endori. So before you advance anywhere further, just make sure to eliminate the Endori and then just approach. Just use your extra joy to get rid of the barrels. Heal when needed from picking up food, if any. Now, this next part right here, we gotta break these barrels. So sometimes you'll get food, bonus items, or weapons. So if you're at full health, just keep the food items about so you can make sure you get plenty of health. So after a while, after those 4 enemies appear, you're going to be dealing with these enemies right here. Now, one thing to keep in mind is if you're doing a 2-player speedrun, there usually is a Hollywood that would jump in during this area right here. You don't have to worry about that in a 1st-player situation, but keep in mind that when you're playing as 2 players, you're going to be dealing with more enemies than you would normally see on the 1st-player side. So anyway, this area coming up is going to be one of the more hardest areas to deal with. Oh, thank you for the lurk, Bearmans. Hope you're having a good morning. We're just doing a guide for Final Fight 5 for speedruns. So once I get done with this, I'm going to export this to YouTube and then later speedruns.com. Anyway, you're free to enjoy watching me do a guide. It's not going to be picture perfect, but I will do the best I can. So anyway, coming up after you beat all the enemies here, you're going to be advancing forward. Now, in a casual sense, you want to be luring out the Roxys and Poisons one by one. And that'll let you deal with these guys pretty easily. That's because they love to jump all over the place. Now, of course, we're dealing with a speedrun, of course, so we do not want to be doing that most of the time. So anyway, let's reload. So technically, in a speedrun sense, we want to be start moving forward the moment we see go. Now, one thing to keep in mind, though, is that we got an Elgato and a Hollywood jumping in, so they might come after us. So it's very hard to elude them. Now, sometimes you can actually despawn them, but one thing about faster enemies is that it is not easy to get them to despawn. Yeah, one thing about the Elgatos and Hollywoods is that you want to be careful when fighting them because if they have the knife, at least in the arcade version, they have a very huge stab range. So anyway, once you beat all the enemies, you want to position your character right up here. So usually most of the time you'll be able to intercept most of them, but unfortunately we didn't get that here. And usually these guys will try to line themselves up. But technically what happens is that when you're through dealing with all the enemies that initially appear here, you would have to deal with the two P's and then 2 J's. Then after that, you deal with axles and slashes after that. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and create a save point. So if you're running low on health, there is a trash can that will appear after you get past this area. So there is a slash and a 2P that will come out to attack you. You can either choose to eliminate them or just advance, but technically if you're low on health and you don't want to take any deaths, you want to definitely pick up the chicken here. So anyway, this next part's going to be difficult. You'll notice that the music changed, and that stays that way for the rest of the game. So anyway, you want to be on the bottom part of the screen. That way that lets you bypass the Montalvo cocktail bombs. And you'll definitely want to move up here, because the 2 P's and J's will start coming after us. So we want to hit chain throws whenever we can and force them all on the other side, and try to get rid of them as quickly as possible. Because we do not want to be dealing with these enemies when we start fighting the Hollywoods and Elgatos. So anyway, let's create another save file again, so we can go over the next part here. So you don't want to break this barrel, because that'll still be there when you advance. Now, this is probably the most difficult area in the entire game outside Uptown's final stop area before Belgar gets fought. And this is because you're fighting both Hollywoods and Elgatos. These guys just love to get right up to your face and stab you and do all this nasty stuff to you. So you're going to have to play very hard defense or infinites if you're playing as Guy and Cody. It is possible to get through this area without dying, or take a heavy health loss. But technically, one of the big problems about fighting this area is that if they pull out the knives and you stun them, what happens is if the plane starts getting too full with the knives and it interrupts your attacks, what you want to do is move to the upper planes or lower planes, depending on the knife placement. So anyway, let's do this again. Just to give you a general idea. So we're going to keep most of the enemies on one plane as much as possible. We do want to be careful though, because enemies will throw knives at us, and they also do the acrobat leap. So you want to be very careful in dealing with this. It is not easy to get past this area without dying. And if they decide to stab you, gang up on you, and do all this crud like they just did, you're going to find yourself in an uphill battle most of the time. I remember seeing one person playing this area back then with Guy, and he got to this part, and he had wound up spending more continues fighting these Elgatos and Hollywoods. And this was during the time when infinites were not known. This was like in the arcades. But technically, if it gets too full of knives, you can always just like move to an upper area, and you do not want to break open those barrels and drums, because those will have huge health recovery items. But technically, it's pretty easy to deal with if you're playing as Guy, Cody, because he can pick up those knives and he can just take them out pretty quickly. Or you can use Guy to infinite the enemies, keep them at bay. Of course, Hagar will need to use his chain throws for protection most of the time, because he's more likely to get stunned and hit more than the other two. So once you get past these guys, you want to definitely start advancing. Now, if you are running low on health during that fight, you can always break open that tires and get more food items. But technically, you want to advance to the point where you don't have to deal with the axles and slashes. They would normally come out right after this area. But technically, if you get forced to fight them, you're more likely to deal with them. But every now and then, sometimes you'll despawn them, and then there's just times you will just not be able to despawn them. But technically, before you advance to the end, you definitely want to take out all of the enemies, because we're coming up to Abigail coming up. And Abigail in the home console versions was very unfair. In the arcade version, he is not nearly as unfair. But technically, in a speedrun sense, you want to do the infinite on Abigail as much as possible. As you can definitely tell right here, it is possible to stop Abigail in his tracks. You do not want to be on the same plane that he is, because if you do that, he's going to lock onto you and pretty much try to grab you. Because he does have the Zangief magic grab trick. And that's pretty easy, but things can go pretty south if your infinite does not go off quickly. So basically, if you can't get the infinites, what you want to be doing is move out of the way. When you're playing as Hagar, keep in mind his punches do have very huge reach. And there's other ways to recover if your infinites fall, but most of the time he'll focus on trying to move here. You can also, when you're playing as Hagar, basically just lure him down here, and then just pile drive him each time. But yeah, things can get pretty hectic if Abigail gets his way, pretty much, because he does have the ability to grab you and throw you into the air. And of course, he gets very angry and does his charge punch, which can almost wipe out your entire life bar. This is even more consistent in the home console versions for Final Fight 1, because unfortunately, Abigail gets the Zangief magic grab trick, which means he can grab you from a specific amount of distance without having to get too close. And he gets that more often than it does on the arcade. So anyway, we're going to show you how this fight happens without doing strats. So he'll run all the way over here, and he'll do that throw. So take a look how much damage he does. And if we don't stop his charge, he'll get mad and go after us. So technically in speedrun strats, you always want to trap Abigail in the infinite as much as possible, and do not be on the same plane as him when when he gets up, because when that happens, he'll grab you or hit you or do whatever. So we're going to try to beat Abigail with the infinite if we can. So that's no guarantee, but if you fail to get the infinite going, you can always resort to other methods and deal with his enemy reinforcements that do come out. So even if you can't get him with the infinite, you have other alternatives to stopping Abigail if it comes down to it. But technically, you do not want to be on the same plane as him when he gets up. And that concludes the guide for Great Bay Area, for the most part. So we're going to create a restore point for the final speedrun guide for Final Fight Arcade /1. And that is, of course, Uptown, which is about as difficult as Bay Area. So one thing to keep in mind when you're speedrunning this area of Bay Area, the enemies will do their darndest to try to prevent you from doing back jumping. Because remember, enemies will attack you more when you're doing back jumping. So make sure you want to be hitting that down attack, aerial attack most of the time when you're back jumping. That way, that it keeps your character safe for the most part, and it prevents them from trying to go after you most of the time. But on certain occasions, enemies will get pretty confident and hit you whenever they want. So you definitely don't want to let your guard down when you're doing backward jumping. Technically, the biggest worry aside from Abigail is dealing with the force point or areas that you have to deal with one specific enemy, like the Poisons, the Roxys, the Headbutt Brigade from earlier. You also have the generic dudes that appear after the two telephone booths. Then, of course, you got the Hollywood and Elgatos to deal with. That could be a nightmare if you're not playing as Cody. And, of course, you also have that last stretch of enemies to deal with before you get to Abigail. So it's best to eliminate those enemies before you fight Abigail. So that way you don't have to waste time dealing with them and then having to deal with Abigail. And the important pro tip is make sure if you do lose the infinite and you need to reapply the infinite again or can't do it, it's best to never stay on the same plane as Abigail, because he will come after you and he will more likely grab you on the same plane. But technically you want to keep him as far away from you as much as possible. But technically the ultimate goal for speedrunning is to make sure you always apply the infinite and just pray that you can defeat him without losing control of the infinite, and basically hope for the best. But there are other strats to deal with Abigail, at least in the arcade version. And like I said before, if you want to know more about Final Fight 1 boss strategies for arcade, I recommend checking out Rishuki's channel on YouTube. He definitely has a lot of information about fighting bosses on the arcade version with all 3 characters, and it'll definitely give you a general idea of how to fight them. Whether or not they'll be useful in a speedrun sense or casual play, that's really up to you. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and close down for the day. And I will try to set up a guide, the last guide, next week. Probably on Labor Day. I will not be streaming Labor Day. I will be streaming Xenoblade Chronicles tomorrow because I will have a day off. But Labor Day, I will be taking a day off from streaming. And I'll probably be streaming the rest of the week up until next Saturday, because next Saturday I will have another 2 to 10 schedule at work for fuel, which is also happening today as well. But anyway, the rest of the you can check out my Twitch schedule on my Twitch channel. It'll tell you what games I'll be running for the upcoming week. I do plan to get Shinobi Active Vengeance on Thursday once I get paid and take care of my monthly bills. So be sure to look forward to that. We do have Ninja Saviors and one other game we're running this week, but other than that, we're only playing 3 casual games and 2 speedruns this week. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and close down for the day, and I'll see you all on Sunday late afternoon, around 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and I'll catch you all later. This is Runner Storm 331 signing off. Have a great day, take care, and I will see you all next time.